This episode is sponsored by Consolidation. I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to go about trusting in you guys, knowing that over the course of all this time we spent together, not a single one of you could be bothered to inform me that there was legit blue hair dye available. Tisk tisk. Strike one. All of you. Anyways, bonjour, ma famille, spotters, trollers, miscreants, welcome back to Soul Mechanics. In this clip, I'd like to tell you guys the story of my oldest and closest friend. So, I grew up in my grandmother's house with my mom. My father was something of an abusive drunk and only really reliably showed up at night to break shit and hit people. But it was a standard suburban house, I suppose you'd say, but large, comparatively speaking, relative, that is, to the apartment after hospital room, after nursing facility, after alleyway gutter, after hole in the ground I would find myself living in subsequent to that. It was gigantic by such standards in the eyes of a small child, I can tell you that much. At the back of the house, there was a huge room that was devoted entirely to storage. And, storage of cool shit, like old costumes, fucking costume jewelry, boxes with old styles and old technologies, all manner of gizmo, stuffed animal dolls, toys, and exclusive Sundaway items from a home shopping network. My grandmother was into that kind of shit big time. As my doors to this house were open largely to the neighborhood kids back then, when the world was a little safer and more precarious, I suppose you might say. One day I would find in this room, stealing away back there, a young boy. Despite it having been strictly interdicted by my Oma, which Oma being German for grandmother, or Großmutter, informal. Despite it having been strictly interdicted by my grandmother, we would steal away back there, he and I, exploring what was to us like a kind of a treasure trove wasteland, complete with tunnels and mountainous areas of stacked and cluttered stuffs. Tunnels through which we could find ourselves, stealing through, leading into enormous closet areas where things began to get very seriously complicated. There's a more kind of the costume jewelries and such, and weird electronics of sorts that I'm sure my grandmother never even tried to use and wouldn't have any idea how to. But she loved to purchase and collect these things. In any case, we would find ourselves kind of back there having these fantasy adventures, playing dress up and telling stories. I do believe this place was, or would be, the origin of every story that I've ever told in my entire life since. And this boy, would come to be my best friend. Yes. Sadly, at some point, my father would catch us stealing way back there and forbid us from ever hanging out together thereafter. Something to do with the young boy playing dress up, in my father's words, "Don't be a faggot." Kind of about as much as he let on. He would demand this in anger, stinking, disingenuous vitriol. It was prominently in response to our happiness and laughter, I would come to find. And after receiving my perfectly justifiable punishment, one of the few things I would come to learn from my father at that early age was to do my very best to avoid laughing. So, after that, it would prove to be somewhat challenging for us to kind of meet up and hang out with each other. And while I came up on the streets for the most part, endeavoring to escape to some extent the more undesirable aspects of my life at the time, he would remain largely solitary, confined to his at-home living arrangement, as it were. Alas, we would see each other lesser and lesser as the years went on. I can say, reading. I wrote this one for you guys. Appreciate it. Anyways, where was I? I can say that I was intimately involved in the epic three-way scene in what we lost our virginity to a girl that we had a mutual crush on in a treehouse shack built onto the back end of the garage. And I would eventually come to introduce him to the girl of his dreams, who later on when we were older, to whom he would almost immediately get married and live kind of happily ever after for a time, while I went to prison. Our childhood fascination with exploring abandoned properties and concocting ghost stories and the like would eventually blossom into the obsession what served as the spark for the fuel of our devoted interest in metaphysics and spirituality. It was his idea initially, really all of it, the initiative, everything, but initially the hypothesis that would lead to the construction of what becomes soul mechanics. Initially termed time mechanics. Time, soul. These properties are interchangeable. Psyche, soul, time, matter, ether. These things are all synonymous, but we'll get to that way later. Anyways, everything that we see is being reflected, is what he would say. Everything that we experience is being reflected. All of our concepts for reality itself are backward. He had a special little obsession of his own with the concept of God and a somewhat funny idea about that God was something we have both lost and are in the process of creating together. That in our individual experiences, God was something like a long-lost love interest sending messages through the dream, of messages of hope for a reconciliation and fears of failure, but that our passage in this respect must be secure, he would say, because we can see this God existing, which technically hasn't happened yet. Therefore, we must be successful in bringing it to life in the future. That it was something that we are here acting as caretakers for, responsible for protecting, raising, and training. That it was something that we are abusing. That we can see its frightened cries for help in every event that we witness. He had a lot of weird ideas. So, time would pass, things would happen, most everything would be lost, and when he died, the very last thread connecting this ruined world to the world that I came from was severed, and the entire life that I had built and lived was gone forever. I don't know, I suppose that's the point of the story, maybe. It's difficult being in this place. But we're gonna fight for it. And we're gonna win. Just, I don't know, bear with me. I'm hesitant, but I'm getting there. I'm feeling a little more, certainly anxious about getting back into play. The necessity is bearing down on me like nothing else ever has before. But just know it's difficult. Please. Get my back, guys. I've always had yours. Anyways, that's about it. All I wanted to say. A little catch up, I guess. Keyless Salai.